Welcome back to another pen talk. Thanks for tuning in my channel. Hopefully you'll find this interesting, educational, and occasionally entertaining video as I explore the wide world of pens. And this is a recent pen that was sent to me by Victor at Vazir. They enjoyed the video I did on their blacktop pen, which we'll compare later to this pen. So they said, "Can we send you a pen?" And I said, "Absolutely, you can." I thought the Vazir blacktop was an excellent pen, and I still use it on a regular basis and have filled it many times because that broad nib laid down a nice line. So I always like color. I also like black. I'm just not a fan of just a white pen, but yellow certainly is in that ballpark. And I'm impressed with the fact that the packaging of this pen, they used a yellow resin here for the box. Very good labeling there, a little bit of a mirror with some laser etching on it. And as we had before with the blacktop, they tell you where to push, and it opens up. I mean, this is a great way to secure a pen. I think the Vanishing Point by Pilot was the first one that I think did something like this, but I could be mistaken. But it's a very well-made box. You know, the hinge is very nice there, but we don't care. We care about the pen. So the first feelings on this pen is it's pretty good sized. It's not overly heavy. I think it's just about the right weight. And the little design elements are just, I think, great. So as we compare it to the black one, we'll see that there's no labeling at the end of the barrel, which I thought was nice on the black one. I enjoy no cap band here, but this resin is really heavy duty, fairly thick, so I don't think the cap band adds to structural integrity, but from a visual perspective, it certainly would break up the lines of this pen. If we take off the cap, it's an unscrew cap. It takes about 1 3/4 turns. And we'll see a classic dual fold design motif. Black cap at the end of the barrel, black cap at the top of the cap, the finial here, and a black section. So they all kind of match together. And that's a really nice broad nib. The pen fits well in the hand without posting. It is a little on the light side for the size of the pen, but certainly not going to get any fatigue from writing. And this design posts very well. Adds a little bit of weight to the writing, which I think I like. And it certainly makes for an attractive pen. So we're going to explore this pen, compare it to the other Vazir that I have, compare it to some other pens so you can get an idea of the size. But before we do that, let's just remove the barrel, unscrews very nicely, and we'll see what we expected, a nice converter. We pull it out and we'll see it is a very nice done. I love it when they put a different material here at the end of the converter, which my feeling is it has a little bit of elasticity to it and will maintain a nice seal. And that metal ring will help ensure structural integrity. My phrase of this video. So that's where we're at. Stay tuned as I explore this pen and put ink in it and see if that broad nib writes as well as the one on the black top. So here I've taken apart Jaune pen, and I have to admit this yellow is definitely yellow. But what I wanted to explore was the nib and the feed and the converter. So the converter comes apart pretty easily, and it is a Schmidt branded converter. There was a little bit of ink left in here. I'm assuming the pen was inked up and written with at some point in time before it was sent to me. And the nib collar here is clear, which is also interesting, and that shape looks familiar, which we're going to explore later. And it also exhibits that great design that I feel really secures the converter as it fits into the back of that nib collar. The nib collar is also keyed, so the nib would go in to the top here, which is a little bit wider to accommodate the thickness of the nib versus the feed, so everything fits together well. Standard plastic feed, very familiar to many of us, you know, Bach, Jowo, and just about everybody else in the world seems to be using that same type of feed, unless they have a hand-carved ebonite feed. And here's that broad nib, and it's definitely a broad nib. I love the logo. I think that's just the right amount of design on a nib. And obviously, you know it's a broad. So that's where we're at. I think we need to bring in the LED and explore this pen with a different source of light as I remove most of the external light, bring down the shade, and we're going to bring in the LED. So the camera adjusts for light, so it's going to change as the light source changes. This is a fairly thick resin, very nicely machined in there, nice ledge. I'm assuming that finial's probably screwed on, but I'm not going to go through any process of verifying that. And as we expect, the resin has some translucency to it, lets a little bit of light through, but it's just a substantial pen, and I really appreciate that. It feels great in the hand. Fit and finish is just about perfect. And again, you can see that very thick wall there. Just nice. So I think we need to, do a comparison, put this all back together again, silicone grease, the converter, do the piston and the threads that go move the piston up and down. Figure out an ink. I pretty much know what I'm going to put in it, but I could surprise myself. I wanted to explore a little bit number 6 nibs and nib assemblies. So I have this Bach titanium nib out of a Keras pen, and I pulled it out of the nib collar. And if we compare these two nib collars, they look pretty much almost identical. And you can screw this Bach nib assembly into the Vazir section. It's a little bit of a tight fit, but it does work. But one of the things that I've always been surprised about, here's a Jowo nib. I pulled out of a Franklin Christoph, and the threading and the dimensions are not the same. So these Jowo and Bach cannot be just screwed in and screwed out. You can pull nibs and that'll work. And also the way the back of that nib collar is done, it doesn't have that same, to me, secure design like Bach uses. So this secures the converter much more than the Jowo one does, but I don't think it's a big difference. I just think from an engineering perspective, it's just nice to do that. And if you take a look at this Bach feed compared to the Vazir feed, as we discussed, you'll see a lot of similarities. This is a little bit of a shiny surface, so it might be used a different resin when they did the injection molding. A little bit different design, but both work extremely well, and that's the important part. As we compare the Jaune and the Vazir flat blacktop to a Lamy Vista and a Pilot Metropolitan, the Pilot Metropolitan is dwarfed by these two Vazir pens, and the Safari, which is not a small pen, at least by length, is also much smaller than these two Vazir models. The Jaune is a little bit smaller in length, but the girth is very similar. They probably have the same section dimensions, which are very good from what I enjoy in my pens. Let's just uncap and take a look at the business end. Posted, these pens again dominate. The black flat top is the longer of all of these pens, but the difference in the overall length is not significant as far as how the pen feels when you write with it and visually, because the only way you're going to know one is longer than the other is by doing this comparison like you see in front of you right now. Let's focus in on that nib and section. So one thing that's immediate is the smaller nibs on the Safari and the Pilot Metropolitan. I'm not saying these are in the same class. They certainly are different in pricing, and the Vazir is definitely a more expensive pen, but from this visual, it seems to be worth the investment. The sections are, like I say, I think pretty much identical between these two. They're both broad nibs. You can see they're highly polished stainless steel, similar to the Pilot Metropolitan. The Lamy Safari typical has more of a dull finish to it, and it also has this very triangular grip that kind of forces your fingers into one place. Pilot Metropolitan was never a pen I learned to enjoy. I tried it as an everyday carry, didn't work. It's just the dimensions, the section, the way the weight's distributed, it's a metal pen, just never worked for me, but that's just me. So I'll put things in perspective. Where the Vazirs, I can write for days and days, and they feel good in my hand, and they lay down a great line. So we're going to look at some yellow pens, and I thought we'd start with this yellow color card, so we can take a look at how that compares to the Vazir. The Nemosine Singularity certainly pops as a really clean, pure yellow. Here's a J&J wood design pen. I did a review on that. We'll give you a link to it. And then we have an Aurora Epsilon. I didn't review it. A Wingsung 3003, which seems to be more on the green side of yellow. And then a Jinhao 599, one of the first pens I ever reviewed. And again, doesn't quite match the yellow. So hopefully you found this little color exploration interesting. I have a little bit of color blindness, so therefore it's good to use the color wheel to give you a reference point. I'll give it to you in a few different ways. I've chosen my ink, and I got a very full fill. It's up and down 3 times, and the third time when I pulled it up, I did it slowly, and that's great. So this converter works extremely well, which is what I expected. So what ink did I choose? Well, I haven't used this Pen BBS ink in a pen yet. Bad of me. This is the second one I got in this incredible, interesting, faceted bottle, which is branded, which is nice. Very few bottles are. They use generic bottles. A great cap. The opening's a little small, but probably 90% of the pens will fit in it. Here's the color. Definitely in the brown family. I don't see any sheen there. And our chromatography shows it certainly does not like water. It just ran away. Not a lot of saturation showing here, but you got some yellow, 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 and then some blue. Somehow it makes this kind of greenish brown, but it's more brown than green. But the real key is, what does it look like when you put nib to paper? So now for that all-important, how does it write section of the review. But we need to talk about the pen, and I need to give you my editorial comments. Number one, I like it almost as much as the Vazir black flat top, but it has a better nib. So Do I like it better because of the nib or because of the fact that it's just slightly different size? And, you know, if I was to only pick one pen, I would pick the black one just because it's classier. But if I wanted a pen to create a conversation, the yellow pen would be the one I would bring. So we talked about the cap taking 1 3/4 turns. We'll give you the dimensions of the section in my new format. I just find this to be extremely comfortable. When I first wrote with this pen, it felt like an old friend. It just fits in my hand perfectly. I generally don't post, but like we showed, it does post. If you're a poster, you can post. But pens are to be written with. So let's see how that Pen BBS ink works in this broad Vazir nib. Oh, I was concerned about this ink being too light, but no, it is not. Another very unique color. I'm still going with my brown, green, green, brown description of the color. This is unbelievably smooth. Takes no effort to write. Takes no pressure on the nib to write. Whether this nib was tuned before it was sent to me, I don't care. It writes wonderfully. And the other thing that's interesting is it's a fairly medium to fine line, and you can do the same in the vertical, but if you put a little pressure on it, you can get a lot of ink to come out. So the nib has some bounce to it, and you know how I love bounce. So this pen will join my daily rotation without a doubt, sitting next to the black flat top. So we need to rate this pen. And ratings are relative. Ratings are how I feel at the moment. And I'm pretty happy right now. So we're going to give this a 9.8. The nib gets 2 checks. The build, the quality, the fit and finish, everything else gets 2 checks. Why isn't it a 10? It just lacks a little bit. And it's hard for me to vocalize what that little bit is, but it's not equal to the other pens that I've rated a 10. I think it could use a little bit more weight so it feels more substantial. There's a little bit of sharpness there on that step up, which doesn't bother me because I'm not going to hold it up there because that section is quite generous and you can hold it anywhere before you even get to that, and it's a far way away from the nib. But it's a 9.8 and I'm sticking with it. So we've reached the end of this video. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, enjoyed the pen, whether it's a pen for you or not. You know, when I watch videos, I can still enjoy the video, and I love pens of all varieties. So therefore, when I see something I haven't seen before, it attracts my attention, and this pen certainly is of that nature. I hope this video finds you safe, healthy, and happy, enjoying your pens, enjoying putting ink on paper, sharing your thoughts with yourself later in a journal or with someone else through a letter. Put some ink on paper. So we're going to say this is the end, and it starts up right away. It's just a great writer. And I love the nib. It's almost equal to my Bach broads, probably better than some of my lower end Bach broads, but then since I have two of these and the black flat top writes as well as this one does, this one just slightly better. Such is the nature of the draw. So we're going to say bye. There'll be other videos soon. I have a lot of content in the pipeline. Have a happy day.